Hello everyone and welcome back to a new Warframe video. Before we go any further, one quick announcement, update sort of thing. We now have a join button, which means you can now support the channel and get awesome little perks for it, like behind the scenes, early access, and much more. It does also go towards help and support me in what I do, but it's all up to you as to whether you decide to do that or not. It's just nice to let you know it's there. Now this video is going to be something that I feel is going to stir some jimmies, because we're going to be looking at my personal top 5 choices of Warframes that are best for new players in terms of ease of use or general ability to push through the initial content of the game. I can see the comments already, but I didn't choose the frame I like, Grr! Or, Grr, that's not right, this frame is the best. Let me point out, this is my personal choice. Calm your titties, it's fine. One thing we all know about Warframe right off the bat is that it's not a new player-friendly game. In fact, I'd be led to say Warframe has one of the hardest initial learning curves of any MMO type game out there. But why is that? Well, for one, the tutorial in this game explains as much as a member of British Parliament who's just been asked what's the actual plan for Brexit. In short, not a lot. Not to mention as well, you have so many things to keep an eye out on that are either explained in such a basic manner that it leaves you more confused than when you started, i.e. the modding station and modding in general, and everything related to it, or the focus tree being another very good example, or things that aren't given any push to give information that would help a new player. Like modding, for example, and let's face it, modding is one of the more core elements within Warframe, and yet as a new player, it may as well be written in Klingon. Jacques Mactor! When we look at frames that are relevant for beginners, we have to look at a couple of different factors that not only affect new players, but even players that have a couple hundred hours into the game will fall prey to as well and need to understand in that manner as well. The other important asset of ease of play is fun. Make sure you're having fun. Don't play a frame if you don't enjoy it. There are some other things that can affect how easy things can be, but without making this video 2 hours long, let's just say you want simplicity in all things to make things easier on your brain, and these next 5 frames offer just that in one way or another. Number 1, coming as no surprise, my first choice for a beginner frame is going to be Rhino. This guy. This guy. Rhino is globally acknowledged as one of the best starting frames for a variety of reasons, which include, but are not limited to, being obtained from Fossa. Fossa is on the planet of Venus, which is one of the earliest planets you will get a hold of. His requirements of build are then very easy as well, and being the fact he's so early in the game means you have something that's very easily obtainable within the first 24 hours worth of playtime. He also has easy abilities and is a jack of all trades. He's adaptable and adjusts to the situation you're in. All of his abilities tailor to one element or another that will allow you to get some simplicity out of their understanding. And that in turn leads to simplicity of modding. That no matter how you mod him, he will always have some element of usefulness and be able to tailor to a situation that you decide on. Moving on to a brief overview of Rhino's abilities, we've already covered their simplicity, but it's worth explaining them to show you what you're looking at when you come into a frame that has ease of access and to know what you're doing with them. Rhino's Charge is his first ability, and even unmodded is a great little move that can knock down and stun those bigger enemies, making sure that they don't get off their bigger attacks, and also allows for a useful amount of repositionability as well as also utility in the crowd control it gives you. When modded for range, this will send you charging for a fair distance as well, and will work in synergy with augments you get later down the line. Iron Skin is essentially God mode. Whilst active, you do not take damage, and it generates a shield around you, similar to a shield, only this prevents you from taking any form of damage. The potency of this is dictated by your armor and the power strength you mod for, and is a surefire way to outlast those big nasty enemies like relay specters or elite enemies that would otherwise chew you up on any other frame. Rhino's 3 is a Roar. Great for buffing your team and upping the overall damage of yourself when encountering enemies that would otherwise be unkillable in your current state. This is benefited by power strength, and the more power strength you build, the stronger the buff becomes, and can make big differences in the overall damage you or your team deals. If you want to be more supportive, you can build range to allow it to affect more of your teammates. Rhino's Stomp is his 4 and probably one of the most useful abilities he has, and probably one of the strongest crowd controls in the game. This will cause Rhino to stomp the ground, and all enemies within the radius of your building range will then be sent up into the air and suspended for an X amount of time based on your ability duration. So range and duration will affect this in the best way, and it basically means if you have a situation where there's too many enemies or you want to have a bit of a break, then stomping the ground will give you that break and allow you to take out the enemies around you. It is a little bit heavy on the energy consumption, but very, very powerful. The only thing I would say about Rhino is that I wouldn't rely on him, as he does have the tendency of making players get a bit lazy after a while due to sheer simplicity of his play, and how easy he can make the game. So use him as a crutch to fall back on when you encounter something you might otherwise struggle with. And a quick look at a build for Rhino. Again, when you build Rhino, you have to first of all decide what it is you want to do. If you want to focus on crowd control, then you're going to be prioritizing a bit more of the range. But this build right here is a good all-round build. We have Steel Fiber, Gladiator Aegis that give you the armor to buff your 2. You got some power strength to help bolster that as well. You got the duration from Continuity and Augur Message that then helps your 3 last longer, as well as your Stomp. And then you got some range from Augur Reach and Stretch, which will help bolster the radius of your roar and also benefit the area of effect from your crowd control. Again, Rhino is a jack of all trades. There's no real wrong way to mod him, but this works for every situation you'll find yourself in. What you can then do is take this build and specialize it towards the elements you would want to do so. So if you wanted more crowd control, you'd build more range and duration. If you wanted more survivability, you take off some of that range and duration and replace it with more survivability. It's down to personal preference. Number 2 is Valkyr. This one might be the hardest of the frames on this list, simply for the boss you have to fight, and probably is the most complex on this list as well. But with a little perseverance, can be one of the best for making life easier on yourself, and really shows the mentality of put effort in and get rewards out. But if you can get a group together to farm out Alad V on Themisto and craft this lovely crazy lady, then you will have a frame that not only has similar immortality to Rhino, but infinite damage scaling that even unmodded can shred enemies 40 levels outside of your effective range. Valkyr's kit is very straightforward, and most players will often fall back on her main ability, Hysteria. Hysteria is her 4th, which offers immunity to death while active. This then drains your health over time and allows you to use of your exalted weapon. Benefiting from power strength and the way you mod said exalted weapon, you start building your combo counter, you notice just how stupidly powerful this can become. Shredding enemies that many levels outside your normal effective range, and with very little bit of modding, can become efficient enough to have active almost indefinitely. So what you'll find for new players is you'll be playing normally, doing your thing, and then you find an enemy you can't quite kill, you activate your Hysteria, and then that roadblock instantly melts, allowing you to get past what would otherwise be impassable with your normal DPS. But then for players who have put time in, will then receive added benefits for much longer Hysteria and synergy with her other abilities to go even further beyond. What you have to realize though is some of this potency does come from the modding of the exalted weapon. So if you want to put it into simplicity state with the exalted weapon, you just want to put pure damage on there, and then as you learn, advance that further. Valkyr's first ability is called Ripline, where she will spit forth a whip in front of her and tug herself in the direction she is aiming. Or she'll latch it onto an enemy in front of her and tug said enemy towards herself. This doesn't necessarily do much damage, and for the most part, it's probably her least used ability, but it's nice to know that if you recast your 1 on the same target within a second, you deal 200% extra damage. And if you do it a 3rd time within a second of the previous cast, you deal 400% extra damage. So it could be nice to maybe specify killing 1 enemy, but, maybe not the most useful ability on a kit. Warcry is her 2, which is similar to Rhino's buff, but there's a deeper element of usefulness here because it's going to increase your attack speed and your overall potency, as well as the potency of your allies around you. Just be known that you want to mod for a bit of power strength and duration to make this the most potent. Paralysis is her 3, and it's a really lackluster crowd control. You can use it if you're in a bit of a oh damn situation, and it'll send enemies around you running in fear because they've just realized that the next Justin Bieber concert is about to start. Don't worry too much about needing this because you're focusing so heavily on survivability anyway, you're probably not going to need it, but just let me know it's a half decent crowd control. Range, duration will affect the length and effectivity of it, and that's pretty much it. And a quick look at a very beginner-friendly build. With these beginner-friendly builds, these are usually builds that can be obtained, or at least the mods can be obtained within the first 24 to 50 hours worth of play very easily from the missions like Lure and the Orokin Derelict, as those do become readily available within those first sort of time frames. The build that we're looking at here is a bit generalized. You've got a lot of survivability with Vitality and Steel Fiber and Gladiator's Resolve, as in the early stage you probably want to prioritize a bit more on staying alive, and then you have some power from your Power Drift and Intensify, and all the secrets to make your Hysteria stronger. And then you have Streamline, which is going to make your Hysteria be active longer because it's taking less energy per consumption. And then you have Continuity for the duration, which also then helps channeling, as well as also the duration of Paralysis should you use it. Number 3 is Frost. Our OR bubble boy Frost. He takes this spot on our list because, for one, he's very easy to obtain in the early stages of the game, from Ceres for that matter, by fighting 2 bosses you would have already killed by this point, who are Lieutenant Lek Krill and Vor, Captain Vor. But this time, you just fight them at the same time. It's not as bad as it sounds, trust me. With a mission that's completable within 4 minutes and early enough in the game that you can get to it within a day or two of playing, Frost offers simplicity in being obtained and a frame that can help a player understand that there is a need for utility in this game, and in turn demonstrate the importance of compositional value within a team. Frost is by all measure a utility frame that offers crowd control and team support in the form of slows and area manipulation. Words. He is most notable at helping to hold down a location, and he has a very linear way of being built. So once you get the basics, you can use one build to make all of his abilities perform to their fullest potential. All I will say about Frost is that although he can do damage, you're looking to use Frost for support and understand the roles of how you can amplify your team's efficiency and survivability. Understanding how to support in Warfare is important because not everything can be solved with pure damage, as much as other people will tell you otherwise. And a quick look at his abilities. His one is Freeze, an Ice Lance projectile that launches at the enemy, dealing nice amounts of damage, but more importantly slows and freezes enemies. His 2 is Ice Wave, a wave of ice launched towards the enemy that slows down large clusters of enemies, dealing a mild amount of damage, and once built with range, can affect a very large area. Snow Globe is Frost's 3, and is probably the most used ability with him, and is what most people will build him for. Snow Globe allows you to put down a bubble with an overall health pool based on some combination of your power strength and some other mechanics as well, but let it be known that this is what you will use to hold down an area, as it prevents projectiles from entering from outside, as well as preventing enemies from getting in as well. So you can place it down on a defense objective and defend that area easier whilst providing shelter for your team. Avalanche is his 4, another ability that is great for slowing and then also reducing the armor of enemies. This deals more damage than Ice Wave, but is also more expensive, and is generally something you want to time out to hit as many enemies as possible to reduce armor and effectively nullify a large threat of enemies at once. One thing to know about Frost is he has a high amount of adaptability. So once you've learnt him initially and you see just how cool he can be, he can then be taken all that much further with his augments, which can ramp up the effectivity of all of his abilities. And a quick look at an easy obtainable build for Frost. This build is a bit more focused on being a bit well-rounded and a bit more survivability based. Once you've used this build to pick Frost up, you'll then likely start branching out with a bit more range and maybe a bit more efficiency that you can make use of your bubble, as well as also having maybe a bit more focus on the range to make more use of your Ice Wave and your Avalanche. There's nothing specifically hard to obtain here. All these mods and in all of these builds, all these mods are very easily obtainable within the first 24 to 50 hours worth of play. Vitality and Steel Fiber there for your survivability. Streamline for the efficiency. Flow because you're a heavy caster for that extra amount of energy to work with. And then Continuity and Augur Message for the duration. Augur Reach for the range. Intensify and Power Strength for that extra bit of potency added into your 2, as well as also your damage. Number 4 is Ember. Now, I know what you vets out there are going to be saying. Yeah, Ember isn't good anymore. She got nerfed harder than the Tonker did. And to that, you are right. But Ember is still more than potent enough to make mincemeat of the star chart and can offer an insight into the fundamentals of cast-heavy frames. As all of Ember's abilities are very transparent, with a lot of the other cast-heavy frames in the game are likely to be a lot more complex. So the synergy of their builds and abilities tend to push new players away. Unlike Ember, where you press the button and it does what it says on the tin. So Ember is initially obtained from the Sargus Rook on Tethys, which is on Saturn, which isn't initially very hard to fight, it's just likes to abuse immunity frames, which DE seems to love incorporating back in the day. The great thing about Ember is that we don't really need to go into a great level of detail for a beginner guide, because she is as simple as they come in terms of her abilities. You're going to be burning things, basically, putting things on fire, and incinerating everything around you. She is very self-contained with her abilities, and although due to nerfs and the fundamentals of fire damage, she won't scale too well. She does have late game potential, however, but the late game she tends to focus more on support and crowd control, making use of her augments to make herself useful at that stage. Ember's 1 is Fireball, which launches a fire blast at an enemy and can be charged to deal bonus damage, and leaves a fire patch in its place, allowing you to create choke points for enemies to walk through and hopefully die. Accelerate is Ember's 2, a self-buff that stuns enemies around her and then buffs her fire damage and casting speed. Quite self-contained, but always useful to have active if you have the spare energy. Fire Blast is Ember's 3, a radial ring of fire that generates outwards with high initial damage, which in combination with your 2 can provide a good amount of wave clear. So throwing this in your rotation is never a bad thing. Well done, Fire is Ember's 4, the ability that Ember became most known for. This is a fire and forget ability, because when you turn it on, things around you just start combusting and taking large amounts of fire damage. And a quick look at a very basic Ember build, which will be good for new players, focusing a bit on range and power strength to make sure you reach out to a large area and smash enemy with fire. You also want to make sure you have as much efficiency here as possible, because you have Streamline and Fleeting Expertise with the 1 level below the maximum to not have such high capacity usage and still get the 175% efficiency. It's a very simple build that works very well and helps Ember stay alive a bit longer as well. Little note is you are likely, regardless of build, to see her damage fall off at about level 40 to 50 depending, but it does entirely depend. My 5th and final option for all of you is Wukong. This fella recently received an update to his kit and has in that time become one of the best solo and new player friendly frames in the game. The only thing that would push against that ideal is that he's quite heavy on construction cost, and he does only come from the clan dojo unless you get his prime variant. So put yourself in the trade chat, the looking for group chat, or find a friend, get into a clan, and pick him up. He's definitely worth it. Wukong offers some immense amount of power and abilities that can simplify missions for you, whilst also being very good for survivability and pump out immense amount of damage, whilst also being very, very fun. Remember guys, fun is important. If you want to know more about Wukong or any of the frames we discussed, check out their related guides on our channel. The 1 is a clone that will mimic your abilities and do the opposite type of damage of what you are doing yourself. So if you're meleeing, your clone will do ranged and vice versa. The clone also gains extra damage and can be controlled, allowing for high potency and helps push damage caps that you'd otherwise struggle against. Wukong's 2 is the survivability that recovers health. It allows you to jump into the air and move at a very high amount of speed, getting out of situations and healing at the same time. This also doubles as a great thing for spy missions because it allows you to sneak through lasers without being detected. Wukong's 3 is added survivability. It allows you to pirouette like a ballerina and then knock down enemies that are around you. Enemies that are struck will then add a stack of your armor to you. The more enemies hit, the more armor you get, up to a maximum of 1,500. The 4 is then an exalted weapon similar to Valkyr's that has an absurd level of modability and power potential. Even with subpar modding, you will end up killing enemies almost twice your potential damage level. And again, a very simplistic build that's easily attainable, easily moddable for. In terms of the Eczema slot, this is kind of down to personal preference. You could put Power Drift in there, you could even put Rush in there. Just with that, choose your personal preference. Now, Steel Charge is, I feel, almost relevant here, the most relevant here, because it's extra melee damage, and there's a lot of preference towards melee damage with Wukong, so it definitely helps. Then you've got survivability with Steel Fiber, and Vitality, with then Gladiator Aegis and Gladiator Resolve, helping to really boost that element of tankability that Wukong comes with. Having Flow, Intensify, Streamline, and Continuity then rounds out the rest of his build, allowing him to be very, very potent. So that's it. That's my top 5 choices of frames that are great for new players to pick up. Again, there are so many other ones that could be on this list. This is just what I personally think works well. I would love to know what you think, though, so if you want to leave a comment down in the comment section down below, leave a comment as to what frames you think are the best for new players to pick up, because then we can start a conversation and hopefully not devolve into a mindless banter of idiots. Otherwise, do make sure you check out our Twitch channel as well, because we record these videos on the Twitch side of things, so that you can get involved with the videos, and that you can also help dictate how the videos end up going. There'll be a link to that in the description of the video as well. So, if you want to come and join us, we'd love to see you. And hopefully we'll see all of you lovely top hatters in the next video. Ta-ra!